In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at what is a sequence, an input and an output. And we're going to be learning a new programming language called Python. Our keywords for today are input, output, sequence and syntax. But before we start, I want you to find this page in your new workbook. Your workbook should be called 7.5 Python Programming. Find this page and see if you can remember what was the code to make a square in Logo. And then can you put the keywords in order to give a definition of a sequence. Make sure you pause this video and complete this task now. Your second recall task is to try and put the different blocks underneath the titles of input or output. Try to move all the blocks. We'll have a look at the Python blocks which are right at the bottom of the screen in a little bit. Pause the video and complete this task now. There's a quick logical puzzle extension. If you manage to finish the other two, please try and complete this task now. So let's have a look what a sequence is. Now a sequence is the order that instructions run in an algorithm. So these are the step-by-step instructions that we have to get correct, otherwise an algorithm won't work. If we'd got these words in the wrong order, it wouldn't make sense to us. And in the same way, if we don't get our code right in a computer, the computer's not going to understand. Here are the answers to our input and output task. These are keywords that you've heard before, but we're going to be using regularly today. When data is sent into a computer, it's an input. For example, typing on the keyboard or using your mouse. When you have an output, it's when data is sent out of the computer. For example, printing or text on a screen. Remember in Logo, when we type something in such as FD100, it will draw something, but our input is typing into the computer. And you can see a picture of our square in Logo, and that is our output, because that is what would appear when we give it an instruction. We've also looked at Scratch. If you're asking the user something, you're waiting for an input, and when you say something, that's an output. The text at the bottom of the screen is our Python programming. And we're going to look more into these in a second. Now you've got two bits of code here. You've got a print and an input. Now just like when we saw the printer was an output, print in a computer doesn't mean necessarily coming out of a computer. It just means an output. And the word printer has been derived from an output. So our outputs from code include the prints. Have a look at those two lines of code. Can you guess what they do? Our input is quite a simple one. When we want somebody to type something into the computer, we use input. If you did manage to finish the maze, then the answer was 3. Now remember back to artificial intelligence, our last unit. We looked at what the Turing test is, and the Turing test was, I propose to consider the question, can machines think? This was made by one of our famous computer scientists called Alan Turing. Remember, he was responsible for cracking the Enigma code in the Second World War. Here is a chatbot. We're going to be creating a chatbot later in the lesson. So have a go with the chatbot and you'll find the link in your workbooks, and the questions must be suitable for school. Now, we've used chatbots before when we were thinking about artificial intelligence. They're used all over the place nowadays. They're used in Siri, or they're used in your virtual assistants. It's just you hear sound rather than seeing text. We see them on the internet. You can talk to a chatbot if you've got a parcel missing from Amazon. Or if you want to know what revision to do, you can use BBC Bite-sized Chatbot to search for that. So the chatbot you've just tried actually has a lot of code behind it. Let's have a look at that code. Here's the very basic code, and we're going to be building this up over the next couple of lessons. We need 3 lines of code, and we have looked at these before. The print. Remember, print sends something to the screen. The input allows the user to type something. So if we use these 3 lines of code, we can put something on the screen. Now, we need to be very, very careful about what we call syntax. If we get something wrong or we miss part of our syntax, then our programming won't work. So for example, if I was to miss a bracket from this code, the code wouldn't work. So the structure of the print line is we always start with a print. In brackets and speech marks, we then have what we want to be printed on the screen. When we want the user to type something in, we have an input, but we must remember to use our brackets as well. Now, we've seen syntax errors before. Look at the code below and try and answer what you think the syntax error would be. Now, hopefully you figured out that FR100 wouldn't work, because the correct answer is FD100. In the same way, our syntax has to be perfect. Look at this line of code. It will tell us we have a syntax error. Can you spot what is missing? Hopefully you figured out that there was a missing bracket. Now, syntax is very, very important. You'd have heard of beta testers. Beta testers are responsible for testing a program. The reason we have beta testers is so that we can remove any bugs for anybody when we're making software. So if a new version of iOS is released, quite often it will be given to some beta testers first. These people might be paid to check for errors. In the same way, you could become a games tester, where you test games to find out if there are any bugs in the code. Your next task is to find the syntax errors on this slide. Now, I've given you a hint at the top of the page, and I want you to try and find what the errors are. In each one, you need to type the correct code, and then you need to type how you knew what the syntax error was. Let's have a look at the answers. The first one is a capital P. Our code can't work with a capital P. The second one, we have missing speech marks, and the third one is a missing bracket. Again, here are the same ones for the input slide. You look at these 3 and see if you can answer them. Hopefully you've noticed that input is missing a U. The second one, it's missing a bracket, and the third one, it's actually a small I instead of a capital I. We should now be starting to get a good understanding of the different Python statements that you're going to be using. I want you to find this page in your workbook and try and answer the following questions. You should have finished the previous page. Make sure you do that before you look at these answers. What do you think the purpose of print is? Well, print is used to output text to the screen. Number 2, what will be the first thing displayed? Well, what is your favourite football team? The input is on line 2, because we've got an input there. And then we had to move output and input to the correct places, so lines 1 and 3 were the outputs, line 2 was the input. Next, you'll need to join your teacher's Trinket class. If you've not been in class, you might struggle with this and you will need to ask your teacher for their class code. Once you've joined your teacher's Trinket, you need to find lesson 1. This is Chatbot lesson 1. Run the code and you need to try and figure out what the syntax error is. You've now got a little bit of time to actually expand on your chatbot code and try and make your actual code. Once you've done that, please complete the evaluation. Now I want you to have a think about real-life chatbots. There's a story of Replica, the AI app that becomes you, apparently. Now Replica is available to download from the app stores and I want you to try it, watch the video and then see how it works.